Hello and welcome to Grow Conversations, your window into the world of medical cannabis here in the United Kingdom. My name's Alex Fraser, and on today's episode, we are joined by Benjamin Langley, CEO of Grow Group. Welcome to the show, Ben. Lovely to have you here.
Cheers, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Let's get straight into this. I think a lot of our viewers would be really interested to learn a little bit more about Grow and the various companies under the umbrella of Grow Group. But perhaps you can tell us where this sort of journey began for you. Where did Grow begin, and how did we get to where we are now?
Yeah, good question. So I was an investment bank by training. I spent 12 years at JP Morgan, but wanted to do something sort of ethically more fulfilling. It's I used to move oil and gas and whatever else around the world on the trading floor at JP Morgan. So it's not something that always makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, and felt that I wanted to achieve something outside of that. So left JP in 2016 and immediately was looking for an investment class or something to be an entrepreneur in, and found cannabis quite quickly as an interest area where I was a really cannabis naive person. But to see the impact it had on people's lives and actually the underappreciation in the sort of pharma medical community of actually the power of the plant was quite a powerful thing for me. So it was an interesting journey, sort of 2016, 2017, lots of learnings to try and sort of figure out cannabis and figure out what Grow ultimately should be. But in 2017, when Grow was born, cannabis had just been legalized in Germany. I think it was March 2017. I happened to be in Berlin when it was legalized. And it was evident to me that there were going to need to be companies in this sector who could solve a whole host of problems that were going to be presented by the fact that this is an industry that's in a European context, in the European pharma context, not really existed, not in a modern sense anyway. So Grow was really born of that thought process. Like this is a huge opportunity, not just commercially, obviously, but most importantly for patient outcomes, which is what we really focus on. So Grow was born to really address the issues in the supply chain, the issues that would stop patients getting their medicine that they need, obviously in a legal, controlled, quality sort of sense. So what Grow does, we're a completely patient-focused organization. Our mission is to get quality cannabis to the patients that need it, and really all of the operations that we have within that goal, within that mission, we're always testing them against that test. So whatever the decision is, whether it's sort of spending capital, raising capital, deploying a new person into an operating field, the big question is this actually going to drive cannabis to patients? And if the answer to that is yes, then we tend to do it.
Fantastic. You know that I have a very sort of patient-focused view on this industry from my perspective and the perspective of Grow Conversations as well. It's something that we're always talking about. How can we improve things for patients? How can we move things forward for patients? So it's great to hear that that's sort of the clincher and the sort of the view of the aim of the different organisations. Maybe you could sort of break that down a little bit for us, because I know that there's sort of different organisations under Grow Group and how that sort of works and how they perhaps how they align on their sort of goals and their aims. I know it's patient focused, but how that works in practice.
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to explain at a high level, again, just to sort of reiterate, the way we think about this is that in order to actually get cannabis to patients, you need to take a somewhat holistic approach. You can't just presume that if you solve one problem, there won't be another problem. So we do focus in on the problems, and that's where we've sort of designed our offering to make sure that we're ultimately getting cannabis to patients. So what do we do? We've got R&D, research and development. So Grow Biotech is the brand of the research and development arm, and that's really aimed at making sure we can increase the quality, increase the standardization, and reduce ultimately the cost of producing cannabis medicines. So what our research and development does is ultimately focus in on some of the processes and technologies that are used to actually produce cannabis medicines. And you'll know this, Alex, in the industry, but people new to the industry won't know it. There's been almost zero technical innovation in cannabis for 80 years. Unfortunately, obviously, it's been in the black market, it's been in the dark, and therefore there has been very little incentive to innovate and obviously capital applied to research and development. So it's incredible the amount of opportunities that are out there to actually really improve the supply chain and make a big difference to the cost of medicine. That's ultimately what it means. If we can improve the standards and reduce the cost, then obviously patients benefit. So that's what our research and development team does. The business that we're probably most famous for in the UK, because it's the one patients will be seeing day to day, is Grow Pharma. So Grow Pharma is a business that imports, distributes, and dispenses cannabis. So we've got our own pharmacy in the UK, which can deliver to patients within 24 hours of receiving a prescription, often sooner. But the important part with that business is also the sort of the educational piece, which you'll know as well as anyone, Alex. The need to actually address the lack of education, the lack of awareness, and to some extent the sort of stigma and the fear that many in the healthcare professionals have around medical cannabis. And I say that without any blame whatsoever, because clearly we only know what we experience and are taught. And the problem that the medical establishment has in the UK, and it's a global problem as well, is that they have not been educated throughout their medical training on medical cannabis. So that's a wrong we try and right. And actually, doctors tend to be quite receptive to those sort of educational sessions, to the fact that we're available, we produce materials. Obviously, you and the team work very hard in making sure that we're always accessible, always asking questions or asking and answering questions. So again, it's sort of a holistic strategy. There's import, there's distribute, there's dispense, but clearly the big part is also that doctor awareness piece and doctor education piece, which is massive. And then the third thing we do is grow trading, which I mentioned at the beginning. My time at JP Morgan well, sitting on a commodities trading floor. So it's similar to that, but obviously with cannabis, we're talking about a medicine, and so the supply chain is clearly more regulated and in many senses more complicated. But interestingly, there's a lot of opportunities for a trading model to actually improve the supply chain, again, which is what we focus on. So with grow trading, we buy in places like Colombia or wherever cannabis is plentiful and the quality high enough, and we ship to places where it's needed. So Germany, the UK, Ireland, for instance, Australia, Brazil. So the important thing with that business is just always looking at the lay of the land. Where is there a shortfall of cannabis? Where is there a chance that patients won't get their medicine? And then ensuring that we see that as quickly and proactively as possible and get ahead of it, make sure we actually fill that gap in the supply chain. So all three things actually fit quite nicely together when you think through. All of them are really aimed at the supply chain, including the R&D. So you've got the sort of the R&D looking at actually the processing and actually producing the medicines, the trading, which is really getting those medicines from A to B, and then obviously Grow Pharma, which is that sort of dispensing, distribution, but also the educational part to make sure that patients ultimately get their medicine.
Brilliant. I couldn't have put it more succinctly. I think that's something that I often sort of, I'm obviously working with Grow Pharma. I'm very focused on that particular side of the business, but it's that taking that step back and realizing that, what we've got set up here is multiple businesses all working synergistically, for using a bit of a buzz term, but with that same goal and that same outcome of improving supply chains and improving that sort of delivery to patients of medicines that will hopefully help them. So, fantastically explained there. Let's talk a little bit.
One thing I'll just add to that.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Sorry, Alex. Is because I think as well that you have companies that aim for sort of vertical integration and almost sort of perfect integration, that want to control the whole supply chain. And I just want to just add a sort of a pointer to what I just said, which is actually that's, just to be clear, not what we're trying to do. We focus on the problems that we think are important to address. We're happy to let other people who are trustworthy and high quality do some of the other stuff. So we're not looking for a sort of world conquering vertically integrated type model. We think we can do very, very well at focusing in on the key problems that we think are out there and solving those problems with our expertise. So just wanted to point out that's the difference between vertical integration and the model that we have, which is slightly more tailored.
Yeah, I think it's worth explaining. And you mentioned in a recent interview with the Telegraph, you were speaking about sort of cooperation within this industry, as well as sort of talking about different ways to evaluate cannabis medicines. Maybe you can could you expand a little bit more on, particularly on the cooperation side, because I know that's sort of something that we're very focused on.
Yeah, exactly. I think with any new industry, with a lot of new people coming in, there's There's a temptation, obviously, to be very competitive and to fight for patient volumes or sort of next month's revenues, whatever it might be. And I think that's as much as we are a nimble, determined organisation. I don't think we want to be that sort of short-termist mindset. And I think others in the industry are similar. But there are obviously some people that potentially do just sort of really want to fight in the short term. But I think generally, my point with cooperation is we have a huge opportunity here as an industry to really do something quite special for patients. And actually, I genuinely believe as well, something quite interesting for medicine. I do see medical cannabis, given its unique nature of sort of hundreds of compounds and cannabinoids and terpenes and whatever else. So it's almost in medicine uniquely complicated as a medicine. But actually, if you allow yourself to understand it and think about it, and don't be constrained by all of the traditional practices of pharma, I actually think there's a real opportunity to actually improve pharma, to actually think about things in a slightly different way. A great example would be personalized medicine. So at the moment, with personalized medicine, people are looking at obviously people's genes and what that means in terms of the reaction to different treatments. So it becomes very complicated when you've got a plant that's also got its own genes, and you need to compare the hundreds of molecules against a person's genome. Clearly, that is a difficult combination of data sets to think about. So what it requires, rather than just ignoring the opportunity, because I do think it's an opportunity, is looking at it and thinking, okay, how can we actually put new structures in place that are going to work for cannabis and for other medicines that are maybe less simple, but ultimately drive best outcomes for patients. So I think there's a big opportunity, and I think it can't be done by one company alone. And that's just one example of the opportunities. I think if we as an industry can join up and sort of recognise that there is a huge opportunity, as I've said, then I think actually collaborating, working together, sharing information, sharing experiences, having healthy and constructive debate as opposed to sort of shooting each other down and competing, which sometimes happens in every industry, but sort of healthy, constructive debate about how to actually get this industry to the next level, and then obviously executing on those conclusions. That's sort of what I'd like at a high level, and I think there's a lot of players that want the similar thing. So I think 2021 can be quite an interesting year in the UK, almost in particular, because we're on a very nice curve in the UK in terms of patients that are benefiting is increasing over time, and that amount of data that's growing, and that amount of opportunity to collaborate and make a difference, I think is growing every day. So it's a good time to collaborate.
No, you're right. You're right to talk about the complexity of these medicines and the fact that actually by solving some of that complexity, we can then find new pathways to help patients, basically, and to assist them with medical needs that perhaps aren't being facilitated or being catered for at this present time. And I think that from a patient point of view, what we've seen is perhaps a distancing between certain patient groups and sort of clinical medicine, in terms of patients feeling let down, patients feeling like they've sort of exhausted everything that traditional pharmaceutical medicines can do for them. And I think that if we can unlock the potential of the cannabis plant and the many compounds within it, I think that we have the ability not only to help those patients, but also to help bridge that gap again between patients who feel like they perhaps have been let down by the clinical services and bring them sort of, for want of a better term, sort of back into the fold. I think it's going to be, that's a two-way bridge building sort of paradigm there, where we need those clinicians on one side to also help build that bridge and to help to really sort of take this on and put the effort in to understand that complexity. And obviously we're here to make that as simple as possible and to explain that and to provide all the education and support on that is needed. But it does take a willingness perhaps to be open to this idea. And I know that we're talking about the complexity of cannabis as a plant, all the different molecules, but also very politically complicated as well in terms of its history, in terms of its reputation. And is that something that you've sort of come up against? I know there was a quote in the Telegraph article about trying to get the MHRA on board initially when we started doing this. So maybe you can speak to a little bit about those sort of doubts and those sort of concerns that we obviously get.
Yeah, and anyone watching this that's in the industry will know that every day there are irrational issues that we face in the industry, which are frustrating because they're not backed by logic. Often they're backed by stigma and a negative precedent, which isn't correct. So these are things that we as an industry have to constantly fight against. But yeah, my fight started in early 2017, I guess, where I engaged with the Home Office and just said, look, I'm going to invest in some cannabis companies. I think this is an important thing to do. Can I do it? And it took them, I think, 7 months to respond with any sort of guidance. And even then, it was sort of, yeah, we're thinking about it. I think eventually we got an actual fluffy but positive enough opinion about 9 months after asking the question, which is just crazy. Any other industry that wouldn't happen. But I thought the question we asked, and it was a sort of structured, almost financial question, but was a relatively simple question, and ultimately it took an incredible long time to get a 3-line email back from them. So that was the first instance, and then you get these issues every day. Opening bank accounts, whatever it might be. There's constant sort of questions and double questions and repetitive questions, and then just checking they understood the first question. So this is part and parcel with the industry, and it's going to take a lot of time to fix. And if you're going to succeed in this industry, I think anyone just needs to accept that you have to fight those fights. You can't. We sometimes talk as well about sort of our individual responsibility, which is obviously to shareholders, to patients, but there's a collective responsibility as well, where if you see something that doesn't make sense as an industry, as someone in the industry, then it's important to call it out and to push. And actually, to the point earlier, to collaborate. So it's if I get a negative decision from a bank, I can whinge, I could potentially go on social media, we could do things that might make us feel momentarily better, but might not actually move the dial. But if we as an industry approach, I know, a financial regulator to ask them to say something positive to a bank, that's a different dynamic that is then constructive and actually solves the issue, which lays the foundations for ultimately more patients to benefit in due course. So yeah, constant challenges. But just the way I sort of think about the world as a guy that did economics at university, is that actually from an opportunity perspective, the opportunities will only be more. The harder it is, the more stigma it is, and the more people are sort of put off. Because if you can see the sort of the light that others can't see, then actually you've got a really good opportunity to do something pretty special. So and more people are seeing the light, but it is a battle for those of us that saw it early, as you know as well as anyone, Alex. So, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and it does feel like we're getting there. It does feel like we're really having progress with that, particularly with clinicians and doctors as well, who obviously were sort of training to prescribe and to be involved in these medicines. So and you talk about doing the difficult thing here. I'm reminded of the I think it's JFK, it's Kennedy quote. Talking about going to the moon, which is to do the hard thing, not because it's easy, but because it's the thing to do. It's an opportunity where. Yeah. That light amongst the sort of stigma and amongst the sort of potential doubt that those might have in the industry. And I think that one of the criticisms we get is that with the private side of the cannabis industry, or the private medical side of things, is that this is the companies in this space are here to make a quick buck. And I guess that what you're saying essentially is that this is not a quick buck. It's actually, this is a quite arduous at points, and it's difficult, and we're fighting decades of stigma. And we're trying to convert clinicians who really aren't aware of cannabis in any context other than potentially being aware of its harms and its potential of negative consequences. So there's an uphill sort of road to climb, but we're happily sort of struggling up it, and certainly haven't given up on that in any sense. I haven't got to a point where we have hurdles that come up, but we're constantly overtaking them, constantly overcoming them, and that's one of the inspiring things to work in this organization is that it's not easy and it is complicated, but there's a real can-do attitude of pushing forward anyway for the sake of those at the very end of the chain of the patients at the very end who are going to ultimately benefit from setting this up in a way that works for them. So and before we move on a little bit, I just want to talk a bit more about sort of patients and about that trust. And I guess one of the big criticisms that we do have while we're talking about criticisms is that often patients don't feel particularly listen to. So I guess the question is, why should patients trust you? Why should patients trust Grow?
Yeah, it's a good question, and hopefully there's a bit of an echo there. Is that just me?
Oh no, that's fine. I can mute that. But let me just ask you that one more time. So why should patients trust you, and why should patients trust Grow?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that the actions will speak louder than any words. So I think the most important thing is hopefully day to day, the patients we interact with can see that we do care, that we do ultimately try and do the right thing for patients. I mean, some of the almost the best examples are the micro examples, the sort of the day-to-day patient stories and whatever else. And obviously we're not going to talk about specific patient stories because we can't. But I mean, one of the important sort of policies we apply, for instance, is just we're very proactive, and hopefully the clinics we work with see this in communicating things like stock levels, things like the timings on new medicines coming in. For us, and again, as I've said twice in this call already, I was a guy that sat on the trading floor and moved commodities around the world. So supply chain is important in commodities. It is absolutely vital in medicines. For us, it's unacceptable to not be able to supply a medicine that has been prescribed to a patient when a doctor thought that was a medicine that was available in the near term. So, and that's not picking on anyone in particular. This is just pointing out that I think is a way that we think about it, where we would rather not sell if they can find the medicine elsewhere if we don't have something. So again, actions speak louder than words, and I think the way we apply ourselves to the supply chain hopefully shows that we're always focused on the patient outcome first and foremost. But from our shareholders' perspective as well, that's the right thing to do. We've scratched the surface of this market. We've scratched the surface of patient outcomes. You don't want to hurt your reputation even at this point. It would make no sense even commercially. So for our shareholders and for patients, there's almost this unique paradigm, to use a bloody economic word, but there's this unique paradigm where patient outcomes are perfectly aligned, in my view, with shareholder outcomes. This is a uniquely, maybe even like post-COVID, there'll be more of these industries, but there's a real opportunity here to do the right thing for patients and to also make sure that our shareholders get a return on their investment. So for me, it manifests itself, as I said, a number of ways, but just it's day-to-day focus on patients, and hopefully the patients see that.
Yeah, and I think I think we do see, like I say, we see a lot of positives without going into specifics from patients. We see that, as this is sort of growing and building, and more prescriptions are being written and more prescriptions are going out to patients, we are seeing lots of positive experiences there. So and obviously I'm biased to talk about sort of the day-to-day, and I'm biased because I work for you, but the energy that I see you put in is it's incredible. You're always at work before I am, and you're always pretty much the last one to leave the office.
The bags under the eyes, though, mate.
Well, and there's obviously a personal cost to that as well, but
yeah.
But it's a cost worth paying, I presume. And but why is it so important to you personally? Why is this something that you put so much energy into?
So I think there's a few things. I mean, first and foremost, and I probably sound like a broken record because we said it a lot, but look, we care about the number of patients we help, but also there's some incredible patient stories. And so I think that patient element, which I won't harp on about because we've already spoken about it a lot, but that is the main thing where I know that actually putting in some elbow grease and sort of staying that extra hour or whatever, getting up a little bit earlier to speak with someone in Australia to check what's happening there and see if we can get better supply, that actually adds to better patient experience. So I think that's an important thing. I think my personal story, I probably need a psychiatrist, and we could spend a lot of time sat on the sofa. But I'm a very competitive guy as well. I like to make sure that I do things sort of right and to standards, and obviously that certainly doesn't always happen because I'm very human as well, clearly. But I am competitive. So I think I'm very determined to make this a success for patients, for Grow as well. So and that stems as well, as I said, we could psychoanalyze me for a while, but my father was a footballer. I mean, frankly, I wanted to be a footballer as a child, and that actually that fell through. And it's funny that I think that the disappointment from the failure of being a professional sports person then drove me actually to focus in on academic stuff, which then led me to university, which also gave me a bit of sort of entrepreneurial zeal, because I was the only person sort of running businesses and making money at uni from what I could see. And then I ended up doing this. So I think this industry for me is really the right place, right time, right. It's got the right nature to it, in terms of that balance of sort of ethical and commercial opportunity, and also just the sheer fact that there is so much to do. So you can graft all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There will always be more to do. We can always do better. Everyone can. And so I think that's it as well. You can buy the patient bit, my competitive nature, and the fact that this industry you can always do better. And it means I tend to do quite a bit of work.
So you say it's the right industry, but perhaps you're the right person for the industry in terms of your drive. And I was trying to make a point earlier about hurdles and overcoming them and uphill struggles. And, it feels like that's something that you relish, rather than seeing as a challenge or as a chore. It's something that you drive head on towards, and you have that energy to overcome those things, and a desire to overcome challenges as well. I think where others might shirk at the height of those hurdles, at the difficulty of the challenges that we face, but it doesn't seem to phase you. And I think that's something that I know I've taken on in this, personally from watching yourself and others work, is that determination to to keep moving despite challenges, and to keep pushing things forward in the right way. Even if it's not necessarily the immediate commercial, the commercial benefit isn't immediate. It's that long term. It's that seeing that presenting that value is what's going to create that long term value.
Yeah, for me, it's about you just got to. Some of these goals are big, but you got to break it down into bite sized chunks. Otherwise, you'll sort of drown in your own aspirations. So I think we do that as an organisation relatively well. But yeah, it's and also you're going to fail as a footballer. Back in the day, I knew I was going to lose games. You're just going to get up and keep on going. So
true, it's that sportsman attitude as well. And you've got people hacking at your legs, and you're 3-0 down, but you don't give up necessarily. And we know, obviously, I mean, you're a big football fan. I'm sure you can quote games where X team has come back against X other team for 3-0 down in the 90th minute. I'm sure it's happened, and it's that attitude, isn't it? It's that never say die. This can work and this will work, and we believe in it.
Yeah, I agree.
And that belief, and that core belief in the organisation as well. I think it's something that shines through. And like you say, actions speak louder than words there. And I suppose it's if people aren't seeing you day to day sat at a laptop in the office, but I know I am, and it's inspiring to see. But let's move away a little bit from about talking about perhaps Grow and sort of the inner workings there. Let's talk about 2020. It's been a difficult year, I know, for many people. It's certainly presented challenges pretty much to everyone who's involved in business, I'm sure. Let's start off talking about those challenges. What have been sort of the main challenges for you and for Grow this year?
I guess there's been a few. I mean, a lot of it I think has been sort of well-being of people around us, sort of like worries about staff. I mean, obviously mental health is no joke ever, but the challenges on people this year have been pretty immense. So I think in terms of our staff, and to some degree some of our shareholders have had some pretty sad stories as well. There's been a lot of obviously sadness, as there has unfortunately been the world over. So I think that's been a big challenge. I mean, the cannabis industry in the UK has actually fared reasonably well in terms of the market growth. So the opportunity, as with all sort of disruptive events, which unfortunately 2020 certainly has been, there's actually usually a few green shoots of hope as well. And with cannabis, obviously, COVID led to arguably led to some loosening of some regs, which were correctly loosened, which obviously meant that things like telemedicine, which obviously the remote prescribing of medicines became possible with cannabis, which we sort of preempted a little bit, which was quite helpful to our business. So things like that, I think, ultimately mitigated some of that sadness. But ultimately, yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to do 2020 again in terms of the experience of the year. I think the other thing, and it may sound almost wishy-washy, but it's a massive thing for a young company, is Zoom, Teams, Slack, whatever else. They're all fine, but you cannot recreate being sat in an office with your staff with a whiteboard or whatever else, a coffee or a beer, and just chatting about how to solve problems, how to make the market go faster, how to help more patients. So for me, actually, of the sadness is some of the sad stories that we've had firsthand as a Grow family. That's the biggest thing. But the second is definitely that lack of ability to sort of brainstorm and sort of think through things real time, which I think we sort of prided ourselves on in the first 2 years. And we've managed. We do sessions, we do all the online stuff or whatever else, as you know, but it's just never quite the same.
Yeah, and it's something that I've definitely missed myself as well in terms of just the day-to-day life of working at Grow. Did almost exactly a year before we moved into lockdown, and it will be, come February, it'll be another year of, and I expect we'll still be, dealing with this into February and into 2021. But it's certainly a different way of working, and we've had to be very adaptive, and it's that obviously throws up a lot of challenges, and it's just really highlighted how enjoyable and how productive we could be when we are sitting in in an office together. And it's a very different job to anything I've done in the past, and that is certainly something that, having had a taste of it from my first year at Grow, I'm now desperately missing in my second, and I know that other team members feel the same way. So it'll be lovely when we're sort of over this, fingers crossed, vaccines and everything in play, and we can go back to some sort of normality as well. So I know we're all very much looking forward to that. And you talked briefly about some successes and market growth and things like that. But what for you are the sort of the key successes of 2020 as well?
So I think probably the big one will be that the market growth kicked in. And for those that have followed the market since 2018, when it was legalized in the UK, we expected more sooner in terms of the number of patients we were helping, but for various reasons, regulatory challenges, supply chain challenges, whatever else, it was slower than I think we would have liked. So the fact that that's now, we can see a very steep and satisfying curve in terms of the number of patients we're helping on any given month. I think that's probably the big thing. I think as an organization with Grow, what's nice is that we've not had to take a step back to even really think about furloughing anyone. We've actually increased the number of employees we've got. Our research and development has patented the technology it's been working on since 2017, and that's as much as we probably can't talk about it perfectly right now, we think it's going to be a really game-changing thing for the industry, which we're extremely excited about. So that's just a massive. R&D is one of these things where it's like sort of planting a tree. You got to wait a little while, but that's now sprung up. So that's really exciting. I think just what's been great is that some of the hypotheses and plans we had in January of 2020 have actually come to fruition despite a lot of the challenges that we faced. So whatever financial results, maybe plus minus, whatever, that's not really the point. It's the fundamentals, the things we believe in, the long-term direction, the number of patients we're helping, and all of that is ultimately sort of come to a fruition. So I think it shows we've got some good strategic minds in the company. It shows we've got some good operators in the company. It shows we've got a lot of opportunity to do some really good stuff for the industry. So yeah, really encouraged. As I said, I think the year's been terrible in many senses, but from a Grow perspective and from a industry perspective and a patient perspective, I think there's certainly been quite a lot of green shoots of positivity.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can achieve all of this with everything that's going on with 2020, then I'm eager to see what happens next year and the year after that, when we go back into, like I say, some sort of sense of normality, and what we can achieve in that now, with the industry's really sort of gotten moving. Like you said, it was a little bit stagnant initially. Looking ahead, I know that you're working hard on a Series C raise for us, and maybe you can explain a little bit about that, what that means, and what that'll allow us to sort of do for Grow going forward. Yeah,
brilliant. So we've set out to raise up to £6 million. So Series C, for those who don't know, is basically the sort of the third big round. You do Series A, Series B, Series C. So we've done 2 rounds before, and this one's, as tends to happen in Series C, it's sort of a thing with startups that Series Cs tend to be quite an important stage for the business in terms of you've sort of, as I said actually earlier, you've proven the hypothesis. We've built the foundations. We've got the people, or at least it's a very good start of a great foundation of people. And you really want to get to the point where you want to scale and push on and expand. And so all of those things are true of us. So our Series C is about fueling to the maximum extent possible that sort of scaling up and expansion of the things we succeeded in doing in particularly 2020, but also 2019 and 2018. So it's about expansion into new markets, where we're looking at continental Europe in particular. We've got things that are very live in terms of moving into continental Europe. It's about sort of building on the success we've had in the UK as certainly one of the market leaders here. So making sure that we're helping more patients every day, thinking about more staff to help more doctors, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also about making sure that with our R&D, we're in a position to tell the world about it as effectively as possible. We are very proud of it. We do think it's going to make a massive difference in a number of places. So there's a need to obviously commercialize that, and that's very exciting. So it's £6 million. We've started quite well. The raise will run until probably end March, but we've had a good initial uptake, a lot of interesting conversations with funds, and for us, I think one of the goals will be to find as many sort of strategic investors as possible. And that's also a Series C thing. Once you get to this stage of your evolution as a company, you sort of want to be picking investors who you think can add value and can actually help you drive your mission. So as I said, none of us know everything, particularly not me. So it's about finding the right investors that can really add to the overall story, which is one of the things we're working pretty hard on. So there's never a dull day raising money. It's a lot of conversations, a lot of work, a lot of emails, a lot of follow-ups, a lot of presentations. But to the point we've sort of said a couple of times, I know that it's going to drive the mission, Grow's mission. It's going to drive results. It's going to drive better access for patients. So it's important work that needs to be done.
Brilliant. Things to look forward for 2021.
Yeah.
One thing obviously I'm aware a little bit more about your personal life and about, I know you've got a family that you're building, you're growing. I'm not, I know you've got at least one and another on the way. What are your plans with your family for Christmas? I'm
not sure. I mean, I want to make sure I'm checking the latest COVID rules and don't say something I get in trouble for. But
yesterday, didn't it? So this is it's a difficult question. I've got that one there, and I've got on the spot with what I thought would be an easy, soft question is actually.
You're trying to trap me. No. So our plans certainly were to go back to our in-laws and create a bubble with them, which I still think we'll do, but I was too busy yesterday to check what the COVID guidance was, frankly. So I'll check it and see if we can. But yeah, my wife is nearly 8 months pregnant. She's due on the 1st of Feb. So it sort of limits your desire to move around too much anyway, to be honest. So I think she's very pregnant and I'm very tired. So we'll probably plonk ourselves down in front of a warm fire and watch Elf 20 times. It's the most likely scenario, if I'm honest.
It doesn't sound too bad, to be honest. After the year that we've had, an opportunity to relax as well, and I'm sure your wife is looking forward to that as well.
Yes.
Fantastic. It's been really lovely to hear more about yourself personally and the aims and sort of goals of and ethos of Grow as well. For one sort of final question, if you could change anything about the UK cannabis landscape moving into 2021, what would you change?
Oh, great question. So there's a lot that needs to be worked on in terms of sort of huge shifts, huge changes. I think it would be the way, and it's not really a criticism of the government because they're just doing what they do, but I think it's the way the government engages, and the sound bites we get from the government are quite almost sort of rigid. They take what they understand, they take what they know, and they apply those rules to the cannabis industry. I think there needs to be a bit more of a meeting of minds as opposed to a sort of set of instructions coming down from on top. And again, I'm not trying to criticize the government because it's on us as well to help drive that. But if I could change one thing, I think it would be the nature of the conversations with the government, with Matt Hancock, with NICE, with whoever else. But I think the conversations need to be slightly less how can I fit cannabis into this square or this circle, and actually a bit more, what shape should the square or circle be to actually get the best outcome for patients?
Yeah, and I think that's sorry, what were you saying?
So obviously a square or a circle. I just said what the shapes would be. Anyways, carry on. Sorry.
Well, that does sound like, you know, and talking to others who are in sort of disruptive, you know, roles in disruptive sort of spaces in the wider healthcare industry. I think that is, it's something that is larger than just cannabis. It's as technology is developing, as our sort of how, it's not necessarily our understanding of healthcare that's changing, but patients particularly, and how they interact with healthcare and the organizations within it, and clinicians, that perhaps is developing and changing, and with new technologies, something that can be supported as well. So I think there is potential to really rethink how we look at healthcare, and I think cannabis and the industry has a real opportunity to sort of pioneer that. Partly because it's actually in this private sector rather than on the NHS. It does give us that flexibility and a little bit more control in terms of how we operate and how we move forward. So I think there's that potential to be disruptive and to really sort of change things systematically for the better for patients. I think that is, you know, without going into too many specifics for 2021 plans and anything like that, but I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, it's been lovely to talk to you, Ben, as always, and been lovely to get your thoughts and feelings on 2020, on the cannabis industry, and learn a bit more about Grow as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime.
I'm sure we'll get you back on. You know, we could even make this a regular thing. We'll do a 6-month update or something maybe in the summer, and you know, hopefully things will be in a more positive place, and in terms of COVID, of course, and of course for patients as well. Yeah, couldn't agree more. No, always a pleasure, sir. And yeah, Merry Christmas to you and to everyone. I was going to say, yeah, just wishing to finish off, wishing our viewers a healthy and a healthy Christmas on the holiday season, and of course a happy New Year as well. And we'll catch you in 2021. We'll bring lots more interviews and videos your way from Grow Conversations. And yeah, stay safe and stay well, and we'll see you very soon. Bye now.